Welcome to Make 'em Take 'em. Today we'll take you through every game this weekend, and what a weekend it was. To give all their thoughts on the action, I'm joined by Seb Gigner.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today.
And Nate Williams.
Hi Mark, good to be back.
All good. Right, firstly, I'd just like to hang my head in shame. My predictions really couldn't have been much worse if I'd tried. Even if I'd just gone for potluck and gone home team, away team, home team, away team, I'd have probably done better. I only picked 2 out of the 7 this weekend. Nate, Seb, you had the same score as me. Chris came away only slightly better as the winner of the week with 3 winners out of the 7 games. But I think that kind of tells us a little bit about the games, that they didn't exactly go to the form book. And first up, we're going to have a look at the game of the week as the Wolves travelled to London to take on the Lions at the Copper Box. Worcester took control just before the half-time break, pulled away in the third quarter and left the Copper Box 85-97 winners. Seb, how important do you think this win is for Worcester?
Oh, it's absolutely huge. You know, this is a team that's been angry in the last few weeks. They lost the cup final. They lost that game narrowly to Leicester. Then they battered Leeds. Of course, some might say that's not really a fair contest. So they go into this game against the resurgent Lions and they say, right, we need to prove who we are and how good we are. And they didn't have Dallin Paczynski, and it was still just a great performance from the usual guys who turn up every night, guys like Trayvon Palmer, guys like Brandon Parrish. They score plenty of points, they fill the stat sheet, and they actually, I'd say it was a bit of an upset. I'd say London were the favourites going into that game because they've performed quite well under new coach Vince McCauley. And yeah, it's huge for Worcester. That will give them a huge boost going forward. Well, of course, it didn't turn into a victory in the semi-final against Sheffield, but nonetheless in the league, that is a huge boost for Worcester.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think it was a very level game, and for me, kind of the edge was going to London because it was their home court, and you'd have expected them maybe to work a little bit harder and show a little bit more passion on their home court. Nate, would you say this is concerning for London, that they can't dominate that home court? They're not creating a fortress at the Copper Box?
I mean, I think we're being a bit unfair on London here because Copper Box, don't forget, is a huge arena. It's like 9,000 capacity, and that's very hard to fill anyway. So some parts of the arena may feel a bit echoey, and some of the sites on the Olympic Park are still basically a building site whenever I go back. But yeah, I think it's very harsh to criticise their form on their home turf, because if you look at the actual results, it's only their second on home turf this season. What's important in basketball is the W. It doesn't matter how you get it. I know it sounds cliche, but it's better than seeing an L. That game was just one of those nights where I think things didn't click. Lockhart only had 5 points, and Dixon was quiet as well, the big centre with 7. So, and those two are point and centre, and I think they should be taking charge on the offence more.
Yeah, for me, you just have to look at Worcester, and it really was a 1-2 punch between Palmer and Parrish. 26 for Palmer, Parrish with 19. And obviously Palmer completes the double-double with 10 boards as well. That's a big night for him. And listening to some of the comments from Paul James, he said it was a kind of strange environment, that they almost kind of just walked their way through to a victory. They were never really massively challenged in the game. So yeah, a huge win for Worcester, but obviously a little bit back to the drawing board for London on that one. So next up, we'll have a look at the huge impressive win for Cheshire over Newcastle at Sports Central in the North East. A big second 5 minutes of the first quarter blew this one wide open for Phoenix, and they never really looked back. They romped home 83-100 winners over Newcastle at Newcastle. Nate, another big win for the Phoenix against Newcastle. How far do you think this Cheshire team can truly go?
I mean, very far. I was... After their BBL Cup win, I actually went to the Grace Arms in Ellesmere Port for the team celebrations. Obviously, have a drink with my old school buddy Ben. But yeah, I was speaking to Michael Riley, and he's in a really good place. He says he loves playing for this club, and the fans are so appreciative, more appreciative than anywhere he's ever been. He's had right now another 26 high game, and I think that cup win has just given them a belief that they can beat anyone in this crucial stage of the season. And I think I might break my code of practice as a professional journalist and put a bet on them to win the playoffs and maybe even top the league next year.
Yeah, for me, I think it's one of those. If you're one of the top teams, because obviously they don't have necessarily the league record at the moment, they'll build it because they've got games in hand. But say they finish 6th. Do you really want to be sitting third in the league and having to face Cheshire in the first round of the playoffs? I really don't think so. So it's one of those, I think there's teams at the top half, the top 2-3 spots that will probably be thinking, don't really fancy Cheshire in the playoffs. So yeah, I think they're building some serious momentum now. Seb, on the other side of this fixture, how concerned if you're a Newcastle fan at this result?
Well, I'd say very concerned, because now there's a double-digit gap back to Leicester in the standings, and 10 points. It's a big gap. Even though they do have 2 games in hand, it's still a big gap to overturn against this Leicester team, and some might say it's insurmountable. You just look at this game and you sort of say, well, Cheshire did a job. They stopped one of the 2 dynamic duo that is Sam Nimley and Jason Page. They sort of did stop Jason Page in this game. He was only 6 of 19. That's a lot of missed shots. Kai Williams, 6 of 21. So many missed shots in this game. Newcastle was so inefficient. They tried to channel through Sam Nimley, and even though he had a good game, it wasn't really enough. And it sort of proves that this Newcastle team can't really ride on their superstars. They've got to get production from everyone. Even Fab Flanoy didn't have a point. Ukic only had 2 points, and I guess you could put that down to Cheshire's defensive prowess, but still, it's so disappointing for Newcastle when you see the players they have available to lose that badly again against Cheshire. They didn't learn from the mistakes they made last time. You're going to be frustrated as a Newcastle fan, but they have the talent there, and if they can figure it out what's going wrong, then they can turn us around this season. But it's going to be a difficult one, isn't it?
Yeah, the stat sheet definitely tells you an awful lot about this one. When you look at the field goals, so for Newcastle, they shot 25 more field goals than Cheshire did, and they still came away losing by 17 points. Like you say, a lot of that's going to come off offensive rebounds. You're going to generate more shots. I appreciate that, but that really does tell you how wasteful their offense and how low percentage an awful lot of those players were shooting in that game. Jason Page, 6 from 19, 31%. It's just not going to get them across the line for those wins. And yeah, a concerning result for Newcastle. And I know we're only in the middle of February, but potentially is that a nail in the coffin for their league title challenge? Leicester will be sitting pretty happy seeing that result come through. But yeah, interesting to see. And for the Riders, they're next up in our next game. So they took the short trip up to Sheffield to take on the Sharks at the EIS. This was always going to be a close one, but you have to love free basketball. And when you get a double overtime game, it's really great. A really interesting game, plenty of swing. Sharks dominated the first, Riders stole the second quarter, and then both teams just fully tightened up in the third and fourth. But Leicester managed to sneak this by 92-98 after 50 minutes of action at the EIS. Seb, how important do you think this win is for Riders?
It's a really important win for them, but honestly, I'm going to argue that this is more of a moral victory for Sheffield in this game, and if anything, they're going to get the boost. But focusing on Leicester, you've got someone like Tyler Bernardini, he scores 34 points. You know that you're going to win a game, even if it is in double overtime, if he's putting up that kind of production. And it shows that no matter where Leicester go, they grinded out against Worcester, and they grinded it out on the road again. In another tough venue, of course, English Institute of Sport, the crowd are really close in. It's a vibrant atmosphere. It's very difficult to play against no matter who you are. And Leicester, they pulled it out the bag, even if it was only narrowly. And that's a sign of a good team, isn't it? That they might not be on their best game. If they pulled a game out, even if they only win it by a couple of points, that's a sign of a title-winning team. And I don't think anyone's going to stop them at this point.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. The kind of psychology, I think that potentially could have been what won Riders the game, that they have the more experience and maybe the little bit more confidence than Sheffield do. But looking at that again, if you're a Sheffield fan and within the Sheffield roster, Nate, you're going to take some positives from this loss though, right?
Yeah, I agree with Seb when he said it was a moral victory. It's a real good boost there, and the fact that they've made the trophy final as well. That's another confidence booster for them. In terms of the game itself, they actually outscored them on every area of the court except one vital area in basketball, and that was the free throw line. The Riders made 17 of 20. And I do remember meeting Robert the Northgate once when they came to play Cheshire, and he told me in a post-match interviews, free throws win games, and if we don't hit those free throws, we'll lose. So that's where the game was lost. If Sharks hadn't sent them there, they would have won. But hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, it certainly is. But I kind of know what you mean. It's, and Leicester are very good at doing that. They're very good at pushing you to commit fouls, and in places where they're going to get shots. They're very good at drawing that foul when they're going to get to the line from it. And as you say, in games that are this close, it is those tiny statistics, those tiny areas of the game that make the difference. And for Leicester, I think it's a massive win, particularly in the light of Newcastle losing on the same night. night. I think that, they talk about 6-pointers in football. That's a similar situation in the kind of basketball world. So, yeah, a huge night for Leicester on Friday. But also on Friday night, the final game was the basement battle between Manchester Giants and Leeds Force. I think most people expected this one to be close, but the Giants had other ideas. They dominated this from the opening tip, holding a 21-point lead at the half and finishing up 94-62 winners. Nate, how surprised were you by the size of the Manchester win?
It's one of those moments in basketball, Mark, where you sort of like take a double take, like when Kobe dropped 81 on the Raptors in 2006. I say that because there was no real outstanding player in terms of points. The highest leaders were like 12 and 13. So it was like, how does that add up? And I went to the full box and I went to check, and what I saw there was unreal in this level of basketball. Manchester snatched 52 rebounds from Leeds Force for the entire game. So I'm thinking they just didn't box out and the Giants were allowed to capitalise on easy second chances. Seb, you were there. You can tell me more.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Leeds did not play looking to get offensive rebounds at all. Whenever they shot, it was a 3-point shot that went up to the rim, and none of the big guys went to chase it. They sort of just almost subconsciously started going back up the other end and play defense, and that is quite dangerous, I think, to have when you're not even going after those second chance points. And the commentators were saying that a lot. I remember looking at it again after that. You can't play like that at this level, not going for those second chance points, because it doesn't matter who you play, you will lose if you don't go for the rebounds and you don't score from second chance points. So yeah, it was really disappointing, wasn't it? It was strange, but I don't know. I'm not sure if you'd agree with me, Nate, but it was a fascinating statistic, wasn't it?
Yeah, it just stood out for me, that's all.
Yeah, no, looking into that in the rebounding battle, absolutely. It kind of tells you everything you need to know. Manchester picked up 20 offensive rebounds. Leeds only picked up 17 defensive rebounds. So you're telling me on the Leeds Force glass, Manchester were more effective than Leeds. It's just unreal. Leeds have obviously done a lot to try and increase their roster. Introducing Sinani, they've got Sarakis, they brought in Ouija. They brought in big guys to go after these boards, but then you look at the numbers. Sarakis, 20 minutes, 2 rebounds. Ouija, 15 minutes, 1 rebound. It's just not acceptable, and I'm sure Coach Nelson will be after Leeds Force for that. But for me, this really probably does just lock in the fact that Leeds are more than likely going to finish bottom of the table now. It's a huge ask for them not to. And Manchester have got maybe a little bit of momentum coming out of that game. The win will give them some confidence, and particularly by how much they won by. But we move out of Friday night now, jump across to Saturday. And Saturday night, there was only the one game, and that was the Rocks making their way down to Bristol to take on the Flyers. Glasgow looked like they were on their way to a good road win. They led by 12 at the half, but Bristol showed some severe spirit in the second half, ended up 80-76 winners. Seb, Glasgow must be kicking themselves for letting Bristol back into this one.
No, definitely. This is a team that's been quite frustrated this season. They show the potential. They win good games, and then they do something that they'll be so frustrated with after the game. And again, this is another loss that they really shouldn't have to chalk up. They beat Bristol last week. They come into this game and they're leading at half-time by double digits. They should be winning those games if they really want to contend at the top of the division. If they want to contend at the top of the league in the playoffs, then these are the games you can't really afford to lose against a Bristol team that has been inconsistent, to say the very least, this season. Yeah, it's going to be hugely frustrating. You put the numbers up, Kieran Achara, Ali Fraser, they have good games, but it's not enough. They didn't put the effort in defensively in that third quarter, and I think it showed. And if they're playing like that and conceding these type of leads against Bristol, you do wonder whether, when it comes down to it in crunch time in the next couple of months against good teams, are they going to stand up and are they going to win games? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one for Glasgow. They have high hopes, and they've got a budget and a roster and a head coach that will demand the best. From Bristol's point of view, they're obviously a reasonably young franchise, still growing. Do you think if Bristol show some consistency, Nate, that they're going to make it into the playoffs? Are they a playoff certainty to you?
Nobody is a certainty in this league, Mark, apart from the top 2 at the moment for me. Anyone below that can have a really bad run at any time. And don't forget, they are trying to hold off Cheshire for that spot, and they are looking really strong into the final stretch after, the cup win. They're only 2 points in front, and the bottom half of that draw are only separated by as many as 4. So I don't think we'll know how the playoffs will look until the last fortnight of the season.
Yeah, I've got a feeling you might be right. It's always great, to watch people battling it out, and it's not just to make the playoffs, it's what position they're going to finish. But for me this year, you're looking at the top 10, can take games off each other, and that final 7th, 8th spots, there's 4 or 5 teams that are going to battle it out for those kind of 2 spots. So I think it should be a real interesting end to the season. But that was Saturday night's game. Sunday, we were lucky enough to have 3 games. First, let's have a look at Glasgow's second game of the weekend. So they completed a back-to-back in the southwest, taking on the Raiders in Plymouth. Obviously motivated by their loss from Saturday night, they came out all guns blazing, held an 11-point lead at the half, but this time they didn't give it up. They pushed on to take this 63-86 win. Nate, Glasgow showing some good spirit to come back after that loss on Saturday.
Speaking of spirit, Mark, I'm going to take this opportunity to praise Kieran Achara. He's been playing in a really good mood since his Commonwealth Games selection for Scotland, and the Rocks will really miss him when he's in Australia because he's that leader in the locker room and an all-round nice guy that brings teams together. I know when I was following the GB team in 2012 at the lead up to the Olympics, he'd always pull me aside and ask me how I am. And, it's just that sort of person to just ask that question to make your day. And he can sort of figure out problems in the team very quickly. And remember what I was saying about that point and centre link-up. I think Glasgow do have that in Achara and Josephs. And they were unlucky to lose against a slightly stronger partnership of Davis and Smith, who had 15 and 18 personal.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. Obviously on Sunday as well, they went without Josephs and without Murray not registering a minute as well. So to pick up that win down in Plymouth was huge because, Seb, we obviously spoke about it in the preview and we both picked Raiders to take the win this weekend against Plymouth, obviously the back of a double header. We thought it was going to spark a revival. What do you see went wrong in this game for the Raiders?
Well, Mark, I think what went wrong in this game for the Plymouth Raiders is what's gone wrong for the Plymouth Raiders all season. They just haven't been consistent enough. They played that well in the game a week ago, and then they come back to this game, and it's the same kind of mistakes. And what really leaps out to you looking at the statistics is that no one really led the team. Of course, they have Neil Watson, but he was only 5 of 14 from the field of 15 points. Last week, they had Keanu Rochford and Will Neighbour put up big stats, but they didn't really come through this weekend. I don't know whether you could argue Glasgow won this game or Plymouth lost it, but I think it's a bit of both. Glasgow, there's so much depth. I was criticising them a few minutes ago, but they are still a very good team, and they can be one of the best in the league when they're up to their game. And I think that they were, and Plymouth just couldn't really deal with that defensively, and they were never in this game. It must have been so disappointing for the fans who went to that game. They saw that win last week and they thought, who knows, maybe we could push to the playoffs, and then they see that performance. It's going to be frustrating for them, and I don't know whether Plymouth can make the playoffs. If they're going to make the playoffs, they're going to have to fix these inconsistencies, and they're going to have to fix them very quickly.
Yeah, I think the thing for me is Raiders they're stacked with talent. There's no two ways about it. You look at their roster, and they've got some real talent in their roster, but they're obviously not gelling, and it'd be interesting to see a little bit of background. You've got Neil Watson, who is their starting point guard, starting on the bench. So what's happened? What's he done to warrant going to the bench? And I don't get this from a coaching point of view. I put my top on and say, now, why put a player on the bench and then still play him 33 minutes? That's not a punishment. That's not changing anything. So he didn't get to play the first 4 minutes of the game. What does that change? That's not going to change his behaviour if he's done something wrong, late for training, late for a team meeting, something like that. Just a strange situation. But yeah, I agree with you, Seb. No one really steps up in Plymouth and kind of takes it, on their shoulders to win games for them. And they're going to need that. If they want to make it to the playoffs, they're going to need someone to really step up and take the kind of leadership role in that team. But also on Sunday, we had an exciting game in the prospects. So the BBL Trophy semi-final as Sheffield welcomed Worcester to the EIS in Sheffield. The first leg was in Worcester on Wednesday. That one ended up tied, which frustrates us basketball purists that any basketball game should be tied, but that's the aggregate system we're left with. But Sheffield in the second leg got massively out of the blocks fast, and they romped out to a 16-point lead at the half-time break. Worcester did step up in the second half, but Sharks just held them arm's length throughout, and Sheffield ended up booking their place in the final with a 75-66 win. Seb, Worcester have got to be so disappointed, not just with the result, but the performance that they put in here.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I watched this game quite intensely, and it was, even though it was a low-scoring one, it was really, really interesting. interesting because Worcester, I don't know whether you could say they were down. It was down to maybe being exhausted after that London trip, but they didn't have that 1-2 punch of Trayvon Palmer and Brandon Parrish, or at least they didn't really deliver. Obviously, Dusha 0 points, 0 assists. He didn't get any assists, which usually helps when Worcester are winning games. But I think again, you can complain about Worcester as much as you like, but I think Sheffield really were on their game in this one. They sort of, it was a bit of a grudge match after losing in the cup semi-final to Worcester at home. That must have really hurt them, and then they came back in this game and they were really solid. They were really consistent. So again, I think that's a bit of both in terms of Sheffield playing better than some I've expected and Worcester being a bit worse. But from Worcester's perspective, it's going to be really disappointing because you win that game against London, you sort of you get such a win. It's a positive boost for you, and then you come to the Sheffield arena and then you lose like that. It's going to be disappointing for them, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Nate, looking on the Sheffield side of things, how much is this finals appearance going to boost Sheffield's confidence and affect their, the rest of the season for them?
Well, like I said earlier when we were talking about the Sharks, it can only help build their confidence and, stack up a run towards the playoffs. I'm so happy that we're in a season where it's not dominated, like cup basketball is not dominated by the one or two teams that lead the league. Cup finals are big occasions and so are playoffs. So if they are there at the crunch end, it can only help them make a statement at the big end of year dance. They can say, "We're here, boys," and get ready for game time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, all those kind of moments for the individual players, they're highlights as well, but it really does reinforce that they're doing things right. And like you say, I think the trophy situation, you look at the cup final, it was Worcester-Cheshire. The trophy final is going to be Sharks versus either Riders or Lions. That's great for British basketball to see different teams on the big stages throughout the season. And hopefully for me that continues. That just shows what a competitive league the BBL is pretty much throughout. But what we'll do is we'll now switch to the final game of the weekend, and that was completed in Cheshire as the Phoenix took on an injury-hit Riders. Cheshire got away quickly, a very impressive first quarter, but Riders warmed up in the second and then completely dominated the third, outscoring Cheshire 27-12 in that quarter. Leicester managed to walk away with the 73-86 win in this one. Nate, how relieved do you think Leicester will have been to get away with the win?
Massively, Mark. I mean, they're injury hit, but they still have a great coach in Rob Paternostro, who can really tell and really understand how to get the most out of his players, how to get the best out of them in tough situations like that. And Cheshire are coming at everyone like a train now. So I'm surprised they held them off. But I do have to say they really have to thank Bernardini for that, because he had a massive contribution of 31 points personal.
Yeah, another huge night for Tyler Bernardini. There's no two ways about that. Seb, Cheshire must have seen this as a real opportunity to turn over the league leaders. How disappointing a result is it from their perspective?
Well, I don't think it's really going to be disappointing. If anything, I think they'd take the positives from this game, because I think any team in the league, really, they play that well against the Leicester team that are just rolling and demolishing teams. You've got to be pleased. If Cheshire go into this weekend a week ago and say, okay, we're going to beat Newcastle easily and we're only going to narrowly lose out to Leicester, I think they would have taken that at the start of the weekend, and I think they'll be best pleased with their production, and particularly the guys like Malcolm Riley had yet another solid game, 23 points, 9 of 14. I think there's a bit of a positive atmosphere around there at the minute, isn't it? Even when they're losing games against tough teams, it is only narrowly. I think they're really going to be pleased going forward, and if they play like this against Newcastle and Leicester, if they make it to the playoffs, then who knows what could happen, because this is a special team with a great team spirit, quite clearly, and I think they'll just take the positives from this game and move forward.
Yeah, I think you're right. If you're able to kind of step away from that individual 40 minutes against Leicester, from Cheshire's point of view, like you say, you go into the weekend, you're taking on the top two teams, you'd take one win out of two. In Cheshire's position, and so overall I think they'll be quite happy. I think looking at Leicester, the one thing, and the kind of unsung hero, and the stat sheet doesn't even really tell you this, for me is someone like Harrison Gamble. So Leicester were without Pierre Hampton, they're out without Andy Thompson, they're two main big guys, and they're going up against the most dominant centre in the league in CJ Gettis, and they keep him down to 10 points. Harrison Gamble plays 10 minutes a game this season. In this game he's played 21 minutes. Yeah, he hasn't scored points, he hasn't grabbed many rebounds, he's not filled the stat chart up, but he's obviously done something. He's obviously, defended Gettys pretty well, because that would have been his main assignment for 21 minutes. So it's situations like that I think Coach Paternoster will be happy with, to see some of the bench guys taking the opportunity and really contributing to the wins for the Riders as well. But yeah, another, a good win for an injury hit Riders there. But like you say, Cheshire, plenty of positives to take from that one. So that was the last of the weekend's games. So guys, now time to hand out some prestigious weekly awards, the Make 'em Take 'em Team of the Week and your weekly MVPs. Seb, you're first up. Who's your superstar 5 and who's your overall MVP?
Well, my superstar 5, I think I'm going to put a point. I'm going to put Mackie McKnight there. A wonderful performance, a triple-double and a loss in double overtime to Leicester. He really did stand out this weekend. He sort of came strong. He did a fantastic job, and then he had a solid performance in the win against Worcester. So Mackie McKnight certainly does position for me. And then going to Leicester, Tyler Bernardini, 2 30-point games in the same weekend. What can you say? He's Superman, isn't he? He does it all. He leads his team to tough wins, and that's exactly what he did here. So he's in there. Malcolm Riley with Cheshire, 26-point performance in the win against Newcastle, and then 23 points against Leicester. That's a great individual performance as well. So Malcolm Riley, I'm going to slot in there. Then I'm going to put Trayvon Palmer in there as well. I think he had a great game against London, albeit it was frustrating for them in many ways. They did just come away with the victory. I think he has to go in there at some point, even though perhaps he didn't play as well in the game against Sheffield, but nonetheless he's in there. And then Brandon Peel, I'm going to put him in there as well with his incredible performance against Worcester.
Yeah, I've got 3 of your 5. So I've got Bernardini, 65 points in a week, and that's more than an awful lot of players get across a season. So he's going to be very happy with that. Riley's performance was massive, and the win over the Eagles obviously makes that an even bigger performance. And then Peel, he just missed a double-double this season. It's unreal. I appreciate they lost, but 20 points, 12 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks. What more can you ask from your big man? The 2 differences I had was I had Alexander at the Sharks, 30 points, and takes the Sharks through to the trophy final. And then I chose Leslie Smith as well, and it was kind of twofold. Big personal performance, 18 points, 8 rebounds. But it was also that Bristol secured that win over Glasgow, and I think he was an important piece of that puzzle. Nate, what about you? Which 5 rose above the rest? And who was your overall weekly MVP?
I've got 3 of your 5, Mark. So, yeah, Malcolm Riley, 26 points, huge win over Newcastle. That's got to go in there. Bernardini, like you say, 2 30-point games for Leicester when they really needed him, with being injury hit. And Alexander, who is also my weekly MVP, because he is the reason, well, not the sole reason, but he's one of the figureheads of why they're in the trophy final. He's just playing unbelievably at the moment. And I've actually gone for 2 unsung hero big men. I've gone for Kieran Achara. I mentioned him earlier. He's had solid games with Glasgow recently, and that's due to his selection for Scotland, I think. And I've gone for Junior Holder of Leicester. And the reason why I did this is points per minute ratio. He often gets overlooked when a big scorer comes in like Bernardini, but he's actually played more minutes and he's putting up solid numbers. He put up 18 in the last game. So, he goes in for me as an unsung hero.
Yeah, I think there's obviously a big crossover between the 3 of us, but yeah, some huge performances this weekend, and across another great weekend of BBL basketball. So that covers all of the weekend's action and brings us to the end of this episode of Make 'em Take 'em. Just want to thank Seb and Nate for joining me.
Thank you very much, guys.
It's been a pleasure, Mark.
And we hope that you at home are enjoying Make 'em Take 'em. And if you are, please share this with as many people as you can. Let's build a Make 'em Take 'em community and have a big British basketball loving. If you want to be part of the debate, make sure you head over to Facebook and like our Facebook page, which is Make 'em Take 'em UK. But with that, we will leave you with some philosophy from the Cleveland Cavaliers advisor, Bernie Bickerstaff. Sometimes you're the pigeon and sometimes you're the statue. See you all soon.